Well, there is no parent that I would fault for them taking pause and saying to their child, are you sure you want to do this? Because that's good parenting. And the students who come to me, and I meet all of the parents, usually it's parents are going, I know that my son, my daughter, this is what they love to do. And I want them to come to your school because they want to develop this craft with you. I have really, actually, not known to me, come up against a student whose parents sat there and said, we're forbidding you, or we're going to stand in your way of doing this. And if that were the case, if a parent were to do that, I would be sort of surprised myself. I certainly wouldn't want to live in that household. But what I see is the norm with parents is they want to support their children, and they want to be cautious about it. So that's why we have live auditions at NYU and at Peabody. It's important because you've got to see them, and they've got to especially see you. They got to, because they're coming to sit in a room with me for an hour for, let's do the math, what's 3 times, for 120 weeks. So 120 hours altogether. I mean, that's just contact hours. It's actually a lot of time, one-on-one. If they'd go to a large university, even like NYU, they'd have large lecture classes. But as musicians, it's very specialized. It's all one-on-one. And I think the parents get a sense right away whether it's right or wrong, and the students do, whether it's right or wrong for them once they meet the individual, be it me or any other teacher for that matter.
How much of your day is spent playing music?
Well, it depends what day of the week it is. Last week, the American Symphony we had the opening concert at Avery Fisher Hall, so we would have 14 hours of rehearsals. That's 2 3-hour rehearsals every day, and then the concert would be on a Sunday. And then inside of that, I have 26 hours of teaching. Half of that's down in Baltimore, and then the other half is in New York City. So it's pretty much constant from about 10 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. That either I'm rehearsing with an orchestra, or I'm working with a student on a piece of music. For myself, in my practice studio by myself, it's actually now on a as needed and time available basis. And at this stage in my career, it's very project oriented. In other words, that there's certain things I don't have to practice anymore because they're in my hands, because it's like riding a bicycle. And that's really great. And I tell my students, do this well now, because years from now, it's just going to stick with you. But we have to learn how to practice, so the retention of that information really stays in the cerebral membrane and deep within. Other types of practicing just for fun, I mean, it's sort of, I just employ that in my teaching, since I do teach a lot. So that never is one lesson like the other lesson. I actually don't have a set program. So when students come in, I got 26 one-hour performances, in a sense, or practice opportunities for myself. And I'm always learning, and I got to stay up with it, because students today play so much better in such complex music and with such great technique, far beyond our expectations when we were going to school. It's really evolved, the art of performance. I use the word train now, because that's what winning an audition is about, is training. I train my students like a top athletic coach teaches a top athletic contender. If somebody wants a job with the Chicago Symphony, they're going to audition for the Los Angeles, it doesn't matter what the orchestra is, they have to train as though they're going to win a gold medal at the Olympics. And they only give out 1 gold medal for the downhill slalom. And they only give 1 gold medal at an audition, because only 1 person wins. And that's the overview. Now, what the specifics are many years of very, very meticulous, very careful training. But if somebody wants an overall philosophy, either read a great sports book, read Carmichael's book on how Lance Armstrong trains. That's a great book. Or just go to the athletic coach at the school and say, how do you get your guy to, jump the highest, or how did you get that young lady to run the furthest, and have a discussion with a coach about what is training about. Mostly it's repetition, and it's building muscles, it's building muscle skills, it's building motor skills for us as musicians and muscles, and it's a slow, methodical training process. And it also, lastly, you have to fall in love with that as well. Because many people look at it as, I don't want to have to, to have this skill set, because it's going to take so much time, and it is repetitious. But as in anything with a musician, the repetition has to be something you embrace. And if you have a student, or if you are a student and you find yourself really hating that process, maybe that's not the area of music for you to go into. Well, it'll sort of choose you anyway, because if you actually don't go through that process and embrace it and enjoy doing it, you're not going to win an audition anyway. So you it'll create the opportunity or the lack thereof without embracing it. But everybody goes through the same learning curve, which is at the beginning it's painful. All training is, right? The first time you've got to do the shot put. You go home and your muscles ache, and same thing. First time you sit on a xylophone and have to play Porgy and Bess, the first 12 bars of that darn thing, it gets painful. But when you know that at the end of this process is the possibility that there's an opportunity to play in an orchestra, and they're going to pay you $30, $40, $60, $110,000, whatever orchestra you're auditioning for, it becomes much more palatable. And that's the only way in. So, sort of as they would say, you got to get with the program. I don't think that anybody is particularly one type of musician, or that they really want to be. And I think that was something that came out of what happened at the end of World War II on the GI Bill. You had a lot of people coming into the music business specializing. In my field, you actually had people who were specializing on crash cymbals. They played a career of crash cymbals in an orchestra, or they played timpani, or they played snare drum. These are some of the legends who are still playing with us. But as time went on, and I would credit probably from my own experience, is probably Paul Simon was one of the first musicians who sort of said to everybody, there's more to this than, bridge over troubled water. I'm going to South Africa, and I'm going to get myself a drumming ensemble, and I'm going to put it inside of this music. Now, I take that back. My first experience was with Emerson, Lake and Palmer. They took the pictures of an exhibition by Mussorgsky, and they put a rock band in it, and then they hired an orchestra, and they took it on the road. I was very privileged to be part of that orchestra in the tour. Frank Zappa, another musician, where here he was really influenced by Edgar Varese, but wrote arguably some of the greatest rock and roll music in the world, and some of the most complex, without a doubt. So I think every musician straight up and down the line. Vacchiano, the great trumpet player, gave 6 lessons to Miles Davis and helped teach him how to transpose. And Vacchiano was one of the great trumpet players, teaching everybody from the New York Philharmonic on up and down. So without crossing the boundaries, one misses most of the rest of the world, because none of us live in one world that is fulfilling enough or rich enough to say, well, this is the end of the line, because it never is the end of the line and shouldn't be.